I am from UAE.
Okay.
Okay. Currently, I'm doing working as a research assistant in UAE University. So I took a break from research for at least 2 years. So I'm getting back. So I'm refreshing how to do the data analysis and all those things as a part. Then I found this in INAS, and that's why I'm here.
Yes, welcome to the conversation. You've joined through other aid, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Yes, yes. Hi, Anne.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Yes, please introduce yourself on chat so that we know who is here. It's also a space to network and know someone else who could be in your field. So you can say your name. You can also say what you're researching about, and you could find a comrade or someone who is in your area that you can connect with. So just give us 3 more minutes.
Sure, sure.
Settle in. Yes, yes. Settle in, everyone. Give us 3 more minutes. We have a few more join. And then as you introduce yourselves on chat, so we will start at 9:03. Okay. So welcome again. We are going to start now because we want to respect time and more will join. So we'll start recording now. And what we usually do when we start recording, we will share the recording. We just change it into a YouTube video because it's easier for most people to pause, to listen again. But if you have any concerns, you just tell me. So yeah, so do not worry. So welcome. My name is Aurelia Munene. I'm based here in Nairobi, Kenya. I work with Ada Africa, an organization which we set up to have conversations, connect scholars, especially African scholars, but not only African scholars, and to have an opportunity to grow our research skills, but more important, to become researchers who are responsible. Florence and Tina, please mute. Please mute, Florence. Okay, so welcome again. Sorry for that. Please, let's stay muted when you're not speaking. So my name is Aurelia Munene from Ada Africa, And this is a space we have created to have conversations. I also work with Other Aid. That's why we have the Other Aid team here. I support the Social Science Journal Club, and I'm very happy to have you here today. Today, we are going to have a conversation about data analysis, really focusing on the postgraduate experience. These are people who are doing, I'm also a postgraduate student, I'm doing my second master's. These are people who are working on a scholarly research, and we are all engaged in collecting data and analyzing data. But we know in that journey, it's not been easy for everyone. Sometimes you have concerns, sometimes you get confused, sometimes you see a lot of math and you don't know what to do, or sometimes it's just too many stories, or you don't know how to move from your objectives to actually collecting data, meaningful data that allows you to analyze and answer your research questions. So today we have two esteemed scholars. They are young, but nonetheless, in this space, we say we do not consider age, we don't consider a level of education. We say everyone has something to say. So today we have two esteemed gentlemen who are going to share with us their experience. One of them is doing a PhD. The other one is actively involved in supporting postgraduate students who want to have their data analyzed. I know in our context, there are two types of ways people engage with their data analysis. There are those who analyze data on their own, but the more frequent one that I see is that most people collect their data and then they engage a data analyst to work with them as they analyze their data. So one of them has been actively working with postgraduate students, and he's going to actually share his experience, what he has seen around that analysis. So let me just mention their profile a little bit, and then we can start. Feel free to use the chat button to ask any question, to also raise any concern. So the first one I'll introduce is Nicholas Outa. He's a PhD scholar and also a part-time lecturer in fisheries and aquaculture at Maseno University in Kenya. He's a research capacity advisor on scientific writing and communication at TCC Africa. He's also a mentor of early career researchers at ADA Africa. He's also an academic editor. You can imagine, he's a PhD scholar and he's already an editor. How inspiring. He's an academic editor with PLOS and a reviewer of several scientific journals, including Frontiers in Aquatic Foods. I think that what I know about Outa is one of the most published PhD scholars I've ever met. And he's also published over 50 publications in peer-reviewed, not, what are they called? Not predatory journals, peer-reviewed journals. And he's a moderator and a curator at Africa Archives, a Pan-African open access preprint. So that is Outa. He's going to speak to us about the journey of why it's so important to start thinking about data analysis from the beginning of setting up your research. Then the next person is Dan Mongai. He's in data analysis, visualization, and modeling. He's very competent in R programming and SPSS. He's trained in ecology, environmental science. He also works on data analytics. His training is from Egerton University in Kenya. He has studied applied aquatic sciences. He has 2 masters. You can imagine 2 masters, one in fisheries management, and then also another master's in data science. And he works with ecosystem modeling in Lake Victoria and also the Writing Hub. So we are in good hands, good people. I would always advise you, always have a notebook to note down something. And please stay muted if you're not speaking. And we are now going to start with Outa. And as we continue, please introduce yourself on chat so that we know who is here. And I now give it to Outa to take us through the session.
Thank you so much, Aurelia, for the introduction. I hope I'm audible enough. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for finding time to join. I have already been introduced, but I will do a bit of another introduction, just to bring context to this. I interact with so many scholars, and mostly young scholars, and also sometimes seasoned scholars, and I support them in scientific writing and communication generally. So I help them conceptualize ideas, because the problem that we sometimes see is somebody approaches you, a student approaches you, even at my university, and they tell you, Nicholas, I want you to help me find a topic for my research. I always tell them, don't think about the topic, because then that is too narrow. Start thinking about the concept. What is the idea you want to do a research around? Then the topic will fall into place, and then the other parts will just fall into place. So I help them conceptualize their ideas, because you could have a research idea, but is it researchable? How then do we make it into a way and map it out into a way that is researchable? Now, part of what I help them do is I help them start forecasting about the kind of data they will collect and how they will deal with that data in terms of analysis and discussion and the conclusion at the end of it. So it's something that you need to start early enough. You really don't need to think about to wait until you have the data, and then you start asking, how am I going to analyze this? Did I collect enough data? Did I collect the right kind of data? That is, you really don't want to get yourself having those problems at the end when you already have data, because if the answer to all these things is no, then what are you going to do? If you realize that you did not collect the correct data sets, you did not collect the right amount of data, you did not use the right methodology, and you did not choose the right study design, for example, what will you do? And you've already collected your data. So you need to start thinking about your data generally at the beginning, at the point of conceptualizing your idea. So that's what I tell them, and that's what I guide them through. So today the conversation here is around what should you think about, especially regarding your data at the point of conceptualization, at the point of writing a proposal, so that you don't wait until it is too late. Then you start now running around with the data and you don't know what to do with it, or you don't know how to fill the gaps that are there. So without saying so much, I have a little presentation just to guide our conversation, and then we will get into maybe if there are also maybe any other concerns that are there. After that, Dan Mungai has been introduced as a data analyst. He deals with the actual data analysis, so he supports them. Now you have your data, you've collected it. Let's sit down, look at it, interrogate it, and decide on the kind of analysis we need to do so that we can answer the questions, your research questions. But then I will start by thinking about taking you through the questions you need to ask yourself so that you collect the right kind of data, the right amount of data. Thank you. So I'll switch off my video just to save on everyone's bandwidth. Then I'll share my screen. Okay, so somebody will tell me when my screen is visible. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Walter.
Thank you. So here we are talking about postgraduate data, postgraduate students' data analysis concerns and solutions. We know that, as I've told you, I interact with postgraduate students, and what are their concerns, and then how can we deal with some of the concerns they have. Whatever you presented here might not present all the concerns you have. So if you have any, then it's a good thing maybe also to add them in the chat and also just have an idea. We can talk about some of this as we go along. But even before I start the presentation, maybe just one person can tell me, what are those things that go into, what do you think about your data? Or how do you think about data collection and anything surrounding data at the time when you're conceptualizing your research idea? Or what did you think about if maybe you are at a point where you're already conducting the research or you have conducted your research? What did you think about your data collection before you started data collection? Maybe one person or two before we proceed. Anybody can. I'm really asking, if you are not really contributing, it would be a good thing to just mute so that everyone is able to contribute. So one person can go.
Yes, let me take the first attempt. I'm Crispin Asaben.
Yes.
One thing that I bear in mind is the kind of data to be collected, whether it is purely qualitative or purely quantitative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The kind of data you need to collect. So you think about, am I going to collect qualitative data? Am I going to collect quantitative data? Because then that will inform so many things in terms of analysis, in terms of the study methodology you are going to take. Any other person also? What else do you think about before you set out now to collect your data at the point of conceptualizing your idea or at the point of writing a proposal? Any other person?
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. I would also think about the numbers. How many people do I want to reach out to as per my study?
Thank you so much. So that would be the sample size or the data points that you need to collect, especially like it's maybe a qualitative study, or you might need to think of how many people, if I want to get what amount of data basically do I need to collect to answer the questions, the research questions that I have. So those are things we need to think about. So I will just add a few, and then we will see if there are others that we can add as we go along. So one of the things, so data collection, I think this might not be the only definition, but then basically the process of data collection is the process of collecting and evaluating information or data from multiple sources. So why are we doing this? To find answers to research problems, to answer questions, to evaluate outcomes, and forecast trends and probabilities. So anytime you are thinking of collecting data, you are conceptualizing your idea, you are writing a proposal, know that whatever data you are going to collect, you must make sure that that data addresses at least these 4 things. Will the data allow you to answer your research questions? Will it allow you to answer the research problems? Will it allow you to answer the research questions? Will it allow you to evaluate the outcomes of your research or your data collection? And will it allow you to forecast trends and probabilities? So this is one thing that also needs to go into your thinking. Now, what are the data collection methods? I think these are things we already know, but there's no harm in reminding ourselves. So there's the primary data collection, which involves collection of original data directly from the source through different interactions with the respondents, or if it's experimental, then with your subjects or treatments that you're going to work with. So you either use surveys and questionnaires, use interviews, use observations and experiments. And these are also when you are thinking about this, when you are going to use surveys or questionnaires, for example, then you need to know how then do I design the right data collection tools. I'm going to use interviews, for example. What kind of interview guides do I need to prepare? I'm going to set up an experiment. What are the experimental designs? So these are also things that go into your thinking when you're conceptualizing your idea. The second one is secondary data collection. So this involves using existing data collected by someone else for purposes different from the original intent. So maybe you could go to published sources and find some data that were already published by other people. So you find information and try to collate and try to make them in a way that can now answer your specific objectives. Then there are online databases where data can also be gotten. Government and institutional records, publicly available data is also sometimes there. So essentially, here you are not really setting out to collect your own data. You are using data that is already available somewhere. Now, what are pre-data collection questions and remedies? What are those things that you need to ask yourself before you set out collecting data? One of them is, what is the research objective? Okay? You really need to think about the objective. So after thinking about the research objective, how then do we make sure that we collect data that is in tandem or in agreement with the objectives? You need to clearly define the research goals and outcomes to this to guide your data collection. So you really need to decide on what are the goals. Is the goal to investigate a relationship? Is the goal to investigate the interactions? What kind of outcomes do I want out of this data? So this comes out to the objectives. If your objectives are not specific enough, then you might not really be able to know the kind of data you need to collect. The second question would be, what variables are relevant to the research questions? So what remedy is to this is you need to identify the key variables and factors that need to be measured or observed to address the research questions effectively. So this will tell you the kind of variable. Once you know the kind of variables, we know we have different types of variables. So we have independent variable, dependent variables, sometimes you have mediated variables, and all those other variables. You need to define each of those variables very clearly. So identify and define them so that they guide you in data collection, okay? The other question you need to ask yourself is, which data sources are available, okay? So you need to explore a potential sources such as databases, surveys, literature, or experiments that provide relevant data. You need to ask yourself, I need to collect these data sets. I need to collect this kind of data. Where am I going to get them from? Okay. And then, do I have access to the required data sets? Okay. So let's say you want to get data from the county or from the government, or you need to get data from an institution, or you want to conduct experiment at a specific location or in a specific laboratory. Do you have access to the places where you're going to get this data from? So you must ensure that necessary permissions or credentials are obtained to access the data sources that you have identified. Never forget about this, because you might end up now going to the field and then you are told you need this permission, you need this permit, you cannot access this until you provide this. So think about all this, all of them, before you set out to collect data. Someone talked about the sample size or data points needed. What is the sample size that is sufficient for my analysis? So the remedy is to determine an appropriate sample size based on the research design and statistical considerations to ensure sufficient power and reliability. Let's say you want to tell us about the youth involvement of youth in the aquaculture sector in Kenya, for example. So let's say you want to go out and look at to what extent are the youth involved in aquaculture activities. But then you've only interviewed 3 people, and then you come to tell us that this is a representation of the whole country on how youth have been involved. You realize the sample size is too small. So there are formulae that are always used in the calculation of sample size, for example, or all this. I know Dan will touch on some of them, but then here I'm just telling you some of the things you need to think about, because different study methods and different approaches will talk about different sample sizes, and then they're also calculated differently using certain formula. But you need to think about the sample size and the data points that you need, okay? The other question that you also ask yourself are there ethical considerations in data collection? Okay, so sometimes you're told you need ethical concern, you need to address ethical concerns such as privacy, confidentiality, and informed consent to ensure compliance with ethical standards. These are things you need to think about, because one of the things is most universities, let me talk, for example, where I work at Maseno University, your proposal has to go through ethical review. So the ethical review committee, part of what you can look at before they clear you to go and collect data, they will look at how are you going to address the issues around ethics. So if you're going to deal with people, if you're going to handle animals, for example, like fish or birds or any other animal, how are you going to deal with the ethical issues around it? So don't forget about this as at the time you are conceptualizing or you are designing your study. Okay, so then we have sometimes biases. So don't shy away from this. What are the potential biases in the data? You want to collect data. We are human beings. Kindly unmute. Okay, let me mute. Thank you. So there could be potential biases. For example, you are working in a county. Just give an example. You work in a county, maybe as a county clerk, and you want to look at how budgets are approved or stuff like this. Somebody would ask you, we know that you work in the county, or you need to tell yourself that I work here, and then that could present a potential bias in my data collection or in my sample selection. So what do I do? How then am I going to mitigate the biases? So you need to identify and mitigate. Don't wait until you are asked at your presentation level, you are asked, okay, but there was a potential bias because of this and that. And then you start saying, okay, I looked at that, but then how then did you address them? So you need to identify and mitigate these biases, such as a selection bias or response bias, to ensure the validity and reliability of the findings of your data. Okay. The other thing is, what is the appropriate data collection method? So you need to choose suitable data collection methods based on the research objectives and the nature of the data to be collected. Now, if it's going to be an experimental kind of data, an experimental kind of research, then you need to think about how am I going, let's say we are going to Lake Victoria to collect something on water quality. You need to think about what kind of water quality information do I need to collect, and how am I going to collect each of them? if you're going out on a survey, what kind of data collection methods basically do you need to use? So you need to think about, I'm going out there, and this is my research methodology, or this is my research design. How do I collect data to answer these questions, okay? Then how will the data be analyzed? This is one thing you need to think about at the beginning. And I always ask people, it's always a good idea sometimes to speak to a data analyst before you even collect the data. Sit down with the data analyst and ask them, these are my objectives. This is how I'm going to collect my data. These are the questions I need to answer. But then what are the most appropriate data analysis techniques that I am going to use? Because then that informs you if you're going to do correlation, you're going to do regression, you're going to do all those things that Dan talked about. You need to think about them at the beginning so that you ask yourself, do I have the knowledge to do this? Or if I don't, then do I need to start getting knowledge so that I can be able to analyze this by myself? Or will I need at the end of the day to involve someone to help me in the analysis? So you need to start thinking about the kind of analysis you want to do, whether you know how to do them. And if you don't, then you need to start planning early enough. Is it possible for me to find somebody to train me or somebody to take me through how to do this kind of analysis? So don't wait until at the tail end. Now, generally, these are the 9 steps for planning your data collection. I think we have talked about them already, but I'll just run through them again. So the first one is you need to define your research objectives. I've talked about this because this will inform the kind of data sets you need to collect. You need to identify the data requirements. What kind of data do I require? Okay. Then you need to select the appropriate data collection method, set a realistic timeline, design the method that you want to use and also the tools that you want to use, and then you do what we call pilot testing. Pilot testing, some people think that it's only in surveys where you are going to do interviews, for example, where you can go and do come and check. Even in experiments, when you are setting up experiments, sometimes it's good to do some treatments and then say, okay, I'm going to do these treatments and I'm supposed to run my experiment for maybe 5 days or maybe for 1 week, for example. You can say, okay, I'm going to do a pre-test, like a pilot test. I'll do the treatments and then just observe over 3 days or 4 days, see how the trend looks like, and then see whether the methodology I've chosen or the kind of setup, the experimental setup I've taken is really going to serve me or not. And then after the pilot testing, and the data from the pilot test, whether it is a survey or an experiment, this data has to be analyzed. Make sure you analyze this data in the way that you are going to analyze the final data, the actual data. So this pilot data needs to be analyzed. You need to even try to interpret it and try to understand what they mean so that you know whether you need to proceed with data collection using the same tools, the same techniques, or there are things you might need to change. So after analyzing the pilot data, you need to go into standardization. Now you standardize the way you are going to do this, and then establish data collection procedure, and then you talk about data analysis plan. But what are the effects or the problems that come with the correct data? So let's say you collected your data, and then what could be the problem? One of them could be erroneous conclusions that squander resources. So you collected wrong data, so you might be making your own conclusions that are not supported by your data. Then decisions can also be made that compromise public policy because you did not do the correct data collection. There is also a capacity to correctly respond to research inquiries. You can also bring harm to participants who are humans or animals. So you've chosen the wrong experimental design, you've chosen the wrong data collection methodology, you might end up causing harm to the participants. You can also deceive other researchers into pursuing futile research avenues. People read your paper, and then they look at your recommendations, for example, and conclusions, and then they get direction for future research. But then if your data was not collected the right way, then you might end up directing them in the wrong direction, okay? Then there is the study's inability to be replicated and validated. I think there is what we call the replicability crisis in research. Somebody has collected data, you don't know how this data was collected, you don't know what went into the preparation for the collection, you don't know the rationale behind the methodology used, you don't know how the data was analyzed. So you have their data, but you cannot replicate what they did. Okay, so having thought about all this, I want now to allow Dan to come in and present to us and maybe talk to us about other things that he has always experienced while dealing with students and also other researchers in data analysis. And then after that, we can have a conversation. So thank you for now. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ota. As Dan is coming in, please prepare your questions. Ota has talked about some very important procedures that you need to have in place. Please just prepare your questions so that we want to have good time for discussion and questions. So start preparing that. Any comment, anything you can also add on to the conversation is truly, truly welcome. So Dan, over to you. Yes, we are going to record. We are going to share slides with you on the two spaces. That is the Other Aid Social Science space and the Africana Journal Club. So do not worry. You will have all the recording and the slides by Monday. Dan, you're good?
Yes.
Okay.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can see half of your face. Maybe we can see the full face.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, how is everybody? I hope you're all well. I hope you're doing well. As you've heard, I'm Dan Mungai, and I deal every day with data. I believe from morning to evening, even sometimes at night. Sometimes we work with people from other regions in different time zones, and sometimes it is difficult, but we try our best to help those who can. So I would like to go just direct to my presentation, and I'll try as much as possible not to replicate what Ota has just said. I'll just try to maybe speak about what I meet on a daily basis and the concerns that I have and the issues that I've met firsthand. Let me know, just a minute. Just a minute.
No worries.
Yeah.
So,
Can you see my screen?
yes.
Good. Now this is our topic for today, and I believe I will go just into the things that I've met across in my experience during doing data analysis for people and doing research myself. I won't go back to doing a lot of introduction about myself, but I'm just my name is Dan Mungai. I also work for the government, but I'm mostly a data enthusiast, a data science enthusiast and a statistician. I like so much to deal with the data every day. Mathematics is a language that I love so much. And because of that, I've already had some experience in statistical programming languages such as R and the multipurpose programming language Python. And I've assisted several students in designing their research projects, carrying out their projects, doing their data analysis, and even reporting after interpretation of their data. So I've dealt with students from all walks of life, in social sciences, in natural sciences, in medical sciences, on issues regarding and revolving around data collection. Now, someone is not muted. So I believe we have more people than from Kenya. We have people outside of Kenya. I've seen some people from Nigeria, but in our Kenyan context, I would like someone to tell me what makes it legal to do research in Kenya, and why is data collection allowed in the Kenyan context? How sure are you that whatever you're doing in research is not illegal, it is permitted by law? Anybody with who can maybe say something? Any legal aspects of research and data? Yes, go on.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'm happy once more. The legal aspects that promote research in the country is from the jurisdictions of the government establishing a NACOSTI, which has to control research at all levels, both at corporate and individual level. Then we also have the Statistical Act, where KNBS has a share of collecting data to promote policy and national development. Then also the universities, which have components of policy research that are authenticated by NACOSTI or themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is very good. And I would like to start from the word go. What is the supreme law of the land? If I can just go back to you at Urban, what is the supreme law of the land?
The Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Exactly. And every other law must be in line with the Constitution. Therefore, all those organizations and those departments we've spoken about must derive their mandate from the Constitution. And now, let me just go ahead and just speak about what the Constitution says about this. And there is, on the freedom of expression, there is this right, that freedom or right that is well stated in the Constitution, that every person has the right to freedom of expression. And this freedom of expression includes freedom to seek, receive, or impart information or ideas. So anyone who contravenes this, and any law that contravenes this, is null and void, because it's the supreme law of the land. And every person has a right of freedom of expression through artistic creativity. And also you have freedom of academic freedom and freedom of scientific research. So this freedom of research through our Constitution ensures that everyone has the right and freedom to do research in whatever they want to do. So this is a freedom that is enshrined in our Constitution. However, because you are dealing with the data, there is something on human dignity, that every person has inherent dignity and the right to have that dignity respected and protected. Therefore, when you are collecting your data, you always have to consider this. The data you are collecting, does it in any way interfere with the dignity of the person you're talking about, of the data you are collecting? Sometimes you may be collecting sensitive personal data, maybe data on your health. Maybe you are trying to map cholera outbreaks or epidemics or something, or diseases. That is sensitive information. And sometimes you go to households, and sometimes you get personal data. But this data you get, you must ensure that the dignity of the people whose data you are collecting is protected. And also you have to know that the data you collect, privacy must be in your system of data collection, that every person has a right to privacy, which includes not to have their personal home or property seized. But in this case, we can talk about C, which information relating to their family or private affairs are necessary, required, or revealed, and the privacy of their communication infringed. Every person has a right to privacy, which includes the right not to have these four aspects contravened. So whenever you're collecting data, be careful of C and D. Information relating to their family or private affairs are necessary, required, or revealed. That should not happen. And in light with that, there is the Data Protection Act, that if you're dealing with the data, you should be conversant with this act. Although this act speaks about data processors and data controllers, which has its definitions in there, you must understand the tenets of this act. And it is a very short document of around, I think, 32 pages, that it is good you go through it, because you are dealing every day with data. There's a Data Protection Act. Please be aware of it when you're dealing with the data. And some of the principles of the Data Protection Act is one of them is privacy. Privacy is here. And also the data that you collect, you must tell these people, I'm collecting this data for this purpose. And you cannot collect data beyond the purpose which you have stated to them. And those people have a right. You should collect your data in a way, your data management system should be in a way that these people, can be able to access their data. And they can also ask you to delete them from your system or to remove some aspects of that data from it. And you should do that. And that is provided within the Data Protection Act. Just get to know about this act and know what applies to you and what does not apply to you. That is just generally on data. And now let's talk about concerns and solutions now. Let me just generally talk about concerns in research. And one of the things that OTA has taken us through is the research cycle. And most of the time, most students are not aware that the research cycle, that research is a process that starts from the concept all the way to data analysis and reporting. And sometimes people just collect data and then they want to work backwards without having defined objectives, defined research questions, without even knowing, not even having a research method. It's something that they have in their head and then they go ahead and collect data. And sometimes some people send it to me, their data, and I don't know what to do with their data because number one, I don't know what was the objective of collecting this data. I don't know what is your research question. I don't know what the methodology that you said that you're going to use to analyze your data. So you must understand that data analysis is just a section, it's just a part of the full research cycle. That it starts from the concept all the way to the, and we should know that anything, any mess that is made before data collection cannot be solved after data collection. You either go back to collecting your data afresh or redesign the whole experiment or the whole survey. So you must understand that it has to be from top to bottom. You can't just starting with the data collection and then you want now to create your questions and objectives later. Any mistake that is made in the preceding sections cannot be solved after data has been collected. You'll have wasted your money. You just have to go back and maybe recollect that data most of the time in most of the cases. And because of that, because of most of the time not following that procedure, you are likely to collect data that is insufficient and data that is of poor quality. And collecting data that is insufficient is mostly due to not understanding the sample size calculations. There are different methods and formulas for sample size calculations, such as the Yemen's method. And this sample size must be representative of your population. Because remember, whatever you are taking from the population is what we're calling the statistic. And whatever is done in the small data that you have together is a statistic. Therefore, your statistic, whatever you have collected must be representative of the population that you want to infer. So data quality is very essential for you to have meaningful and accurate results. And therefore, this ensures that your data is sufficient by using the appropriate sample size calculation formulas, that your data collection is consistent and it is free of errors. And most of the cases, they are missing data. And missing data, it can be a real problem in data analysis. And when you have a lot of missing data in your files, that means you're going to have your results biased. And they are missing data that are real. Indeed, they are the data that is missing in your sheets. It must be, you must know whether that data is really missing in the population or it was just omitted. And if it was just omitted, there are ways of imputing the missing data. You can impute the mean with the mean of that maybe column, or you can use the nearest neighbors imputation to get to just the neighbors around that missing figure to impute what that figure could be. So there are ways of dealing with missing data. And sometimes there are some ways are good, some ways are bad. You might say that you want to omit every missing data. And sometimes you might lose a huge chunk of your data that you've collected. And data collection is very, very expensive. And all these goes to preparations before data collection. Ensure your data collection tool would handle missing data, and that if data is really missing in the population, it is explicitly missing, showing that it is missing in the population, but not an error of omission. So it's always aware to be aware of missing data. Don't ignore missing data and take appropriate measures of handling the missing data. So most people ignore the exploratory data analysis, the descriptive statistics. And the purpose of descriptive statistics before you go to inferential statistics is trying to understand the patterns in your data. And some of the things you can get from your data are the patterns, the outliers, and other issues that could be in your data. And this could be done through box plots. This could be done through scatter plots. And most of these things, the outliers, sometimes they can be good, sometimes they can be bad. And sometimes an outlier could mean there is a change in the normal system of work. For example, in the banking system, if you find an outlier, a very huge withdrawal, there could be banking fraud. So some of the time you go to data analysis and you're trying to get the outliers. So, but in most of our context, outliers are bad because they interfere with our interpretation and also the inferencing, inferring what our statistics saying about our population. And if you can see here, this is just a short, just a box plot graph on GDP per capita. This is some data called Gapminder. This data that has GDP per capita in every country on earth. But this one, we have done it in every continent. And as you can see, in Asia, this box plot here, hope you can see it. This line at the middle, this line here, that is the median. So that would be the median GDP per capita, the median. And this is the upper, and this is the lower. This is the third quartile, this is the first quartile. And now all these other dots you can see here are outliers. So if I were to do a linear regression, this thing is going to affect my results. These dots are outliers. Everything beyond, this is the maximum GDP per capita where this line ends, and whatever that is above that is an outlier. In Oceania, we have only maybe one outlier. In Africa, we have several, and also in America. So we have a lot of outliers because this is GDP per capita. So there in Asia, there are countries which are doing very well compared to the rest. And that's what he's saying. Also in Africa, there are countries which are very high GDP per capita compared to others. And that difference can be seen well in Asia. There are Asian countries that are doing very well, and there are others which are not doing very well. So this is just an example of just one of the ways of doing exploratory data analysis. Drawing graphs and summaries just to understand how your data, the patterns within your data. This is another one. This is the population growth over the years since the 1990 to the 2010. And you can see this is Asia. Asia's population has always been high, and it has been increasing. And also these other continents have been increasing, but seems most have been not increasing that much. But in Asia, we have quite a jump. And also in Africa and all that. So this helps you, the EDA helps you to understand how your data, how the patterns within your data, and helps you to make important decisions when you're going to do your inferences. Now, another thing is doing the wrong statistical methods. Which statistical method do I use in which case? And that has been the question most of the time. And there are so many statistical methods. There are those that are the ones that have always been there from time immemorial, the ANOVA, the t-test, the chi-square test. So when do you use a chi-square test? When do you use a t-test? When do you use an ANOVA? Those are things you should know. And this goes to the levels of data you are collecting. So for example, you are collecting data in 2 counties. You might compare these 2 counties using a t-test because there are only 2 levels. You could be doing in more than 2 counties. You do an ANOVA. You could be comparing gender and education level. Those are just the levels you're working with, or proportions. You use a chi-square test. Then you want to go to regressing. You do linear regression if your output, your response variable is linear, is is a continuous variable. Logistic regression when it is a binary, and Poisson when you're dealing with counts. And Poisson would really work in a football match because goals scored are as counts, 2 goals, 3 goals, 1 goal, Poisson. So you can try to regress teams and the goals that they have, that they score depending on Poisson, and you can predict which team is going to score more goals at the end of the season using the Poisson, because Poisson regression models work with counts. Then there is propensity score matching, Heckman's sample selection models. These are econometric models. They deal with observational data and in quasi-experimental research designs. Then there are linear mixed models, generalized linear mixed models. So you have fixed effects and random effects. So you have to know why you are doing in the context of your statistics, in the context of your work, in the context of your subject. Now, this is just a result of an ANOVA of the same data that I'm talking about. And you can see here, we have this point at this part. This p-value is most important because this p-value is the one tells us whether there is a difference in GDP per capita in the continents, and it tells yes, there are differences. There are statistical differences. But then you go ahead and do a Tukey test just to understand where do the differences lie. And for example, here, this line shows where the differences are 0. If, for example, you are born in 1990, I was born in 1990, so the difference in our ages is 0. So if the difference in ages is 0, then that shows there is no difference. But if there is a difference, shows that those two continents have different GDP per capita. This is an example of a linear regression, same way. But now when it comes to linear regression, the interpretation is different. So this here, the GDP per capita, here it is. How does it influence the life expectancy? So on. So, but you can see here, this is statistically significant, showing you that GDP per capita affects life expectancy, and so on and so on and so on. Now, let's talk about overfitting when you're talking about models. Sometimes overfitting is whereby this is a kind of overfitting. So you want your data you want a model that really fits your data points, and it does. But now, when you introduce that model to new data that it has not seen before, data that it was not trained on, and then it performs very poor. It performs poorly. So this one is a good fit. This one is an underfit because it doesn't represent the distribution of the data. This is underfitting. This is a good fit, and this is overfitting. And to do this, you have to partition your data. There is data partitioning. You partition your data into different sections. One section is for training your models. Another section is for testing your model, and a final portion of your data for validating your models. Always make sure that you validate your models so that you don't report model coefficients that cannot be replicated somewhere else and give the same results. So another thing is about correlation. Some people just see correlation and say, oh, this affects this relates with this. But you should know that correlation is not causation. Just because two variables are correlated doesn't mean one causes the other. And causation is what means that one variable actually causes changes in the other variable. But correlation only says that there is a relationship between two variables. There is a relationship, but it doesn't mean that one causes the other. So correlation is not causation. Always remember that. This is just an example of correlation. We could go in depth here how to interpret all that, how the direction and the strength of correlations. Now, when you talk about, there is this very famous guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He says that you have to be, when you're measuring cause and effect, you have to be very careful, because in the 1990s, the stock population of Germany increased, and the German at-home birth rate also increased. So do we say that the stocks are births? Were they carrying babies to these Germans' homes? Just because the population increased when the stocks were increasing, it doesn't mean that the increase in stock also caused increase in birth rates in the country. So correlation is not causation. One, just because variables are correlated doesn't mean that they cause each other. And this is the same explanation of correlation and causation. When there is very high, maybe heat from the sun, people are likely to buy more ice cream. And also at the same time, people are likely to get sunburns. But can we say, if you come and tell me eating, I don't know whether ice creams are eaten or they are licked, whatever happens to ice creams, is taking ice cream related to sunburn? Does ice cream cause sunburns? Really, there is a that effect that is causing both. So we should always be careful of correlation and causation. Yes, ice cream and sunburn seem to be related because they are affected by a confounding factor, by a that variable that you have not considered. So it is always good to consider all aspects in your data. Now, whenever you are doing your analysis and reporting analysis, you have to always consider the context. So, for example, if you are testing a technology between adopters and non-adopters, it might be you are testing income. So that income should be in Kenya shillings, in whatever money that your country uses, and it has to be reported as such. You say that, for example, the difference between adopters and non-adopters income is $5,000 or whatever. So you have to always be interpret your data and interpret your results in the context of what you're doing, and you communicate so that communication with your finding is easy to understand, it is concise, and it is clear. And your work should always be consistent. Whatever you say you'll do in your research methodology, the result should reflect that. You should not say that I'm using a generalized linear model or logistic regression, but then when you come to your findings, results, you are talking about linear regression. It causes confusion to whoever is going to do your work. And most of the time, this failure to validate assumptions, the assumptions in models, normality, linearity, always report those, always show that this data was normally distributed. Linear regression always assume linearity, always show that to validate assumptions before you draw any conclusion of the analysis. And if your data is not conforming to the assumptions, there are data transformations that you can do. And when you do data transformation, your interpretation is not going to be the same. It is also going to change. So you should always be careful about that. If you transform your data, maybe by squaring your variable or getting the square root of your variable, you should always be aware that your interpretation is going to be different. And most of the time, most of us don't like correction, and most of the time we neglect feedback and revision from supervisors or from your peers. It is good to have as much feedback as possible. As tiring as it might be, your thesis and your work greatly benefit from feedback, from any quarter that you come from. And don't ever be afraid of any constructive criticism that you might get to revise and improve your work. And always allocate time for multiple rounds of revision, editing before submitting your thesis or your manuscript or whatever. I thank you so much for that. That's what I had prepared for today. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dan, for that presentation. That was really useful to really understand where are those pitfalls that we as postgraduate students have whenever we are analyzing our data or whenever we engage someone to analyze our data. And those are some of the pitfalls that we experience, and it's important to bring them to light. I know Dan has spoken about some things that you may not be aware of, some data language that you're not aware of, data analysis language, but do not worry. Part of the reason we are here today is this session, we are calling it an awareness or sensitization session. We're just providing a sensitization to really provoke you to be able to now start thinking, where do I need to improve my skills in terms of data analysis? Because even if you're going to engage someone to support you in doing your data, you're not just going to throw your work at them and then tell them, see you in 2 months. you have to journey with them as they are analyzing your data. So there is no escape. There's no escape if you're going to do it yourself or you're going to work with someone maybe like Dan or Dan's of this world. You have to also understand what is being done, what choice. You have to be part of that process. Otherwise, what will happen, you're going to have someone do for you all the work. When you go to present it in your defense or in your publication, you do not know what was done. You do not understand what choices were made of analysis and all that. So there is no escape. We have to know this so that we can be able to understand our data and the conclusions that you're making. I think it's part of the human dignity that you're talking about, that for us to be able to do good research, we have to really be responsible enough to know exactly what we are doing and be able to ask when we are not sure, so that we don't draw conclusions that can even put people in harm's way. So part of today's exercise was to sensitize you about some of these pitfalls and have a conversation. And then we've been thinking of having a long-term training for anyone who may be feeling, I feel there are some things I don't really understand about this data language, data analysis. I would like someone to journey with me. Then we can think of a course. And today we have also, we are going to share a Google form where if you're interested to learn more, you can fill it in, and then we can see what are the needs people are having. Can we design a course? How can we design it? How will we structure it? Who will teach it? And then from there, we can communicate more. So don't worry if things have been said and you're still struggling. We have a plan B in place. So for now, let me open to questions. Any question for Outa or any question for Dan, please take over. Outa and Dan, maybe there are questions that were asked on chat. Please check. Any that you are able to answer within what you presented, you can also start answering them. But for now, the plenary is open. Do you have any observation, any concerns, any comments, any questions? Feel free. We are all ears.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. I have seen a question, somebody asking about pilot testing or pre-test, where you want to go out and do a survey. How then do you go about the pilot study? The pilot study basically is where you want to go and test your tool. For example, I have developed a questionnaire, I've developed key informant interview guides, and I want to see, are the questions in the questionnaire able to answer the objectives of my research questions? What do you do? Because if you go out and start collecting the actual data, if you find out that your questions are not really appropriate for your research, then you shall have wasted your efforts, resources, and money. So what happens is you can choose, like maybe if you are thinking of doing a certain number, then you could talk about, maybe I can do 10%. Just if I'm supposed to interview 100 people, I can just go out, maybe interview 10 people representative of the population I want to do, and then come and analyze this data and think about, how then does it look like? Do I need to adjust a few questions? Do I need to change the way I do the interview? You know, all these things. So for the pilot testing, is just going out and trying your tool, and then you come back and analyze. So you can, I don't know, maybe Dan can talk to us about the percentage that you need to consider when doing your pilot testing. What number do you think about, and how do you arrive at that number? But yes, it's about going and testing that tool.
Yeah, Outa, pilot testing is mainly just to, as you have said, to test the tool that you are using to collect your data. And it helps you to revise your tool, and also to drop maybe the variables that are not good, that are not contributing anything to your construct, especially when you're dealing with the surveys. So there is what we call exploratory factor analysis. This is whereby you see whether your construct, maybe you are testing awareness, and in this awareness is tested by several questions. So these questions, how are these questions contributing to the whole construct of awareness? And if there is a question that is contributing less than 0.4 of 1, the top one is 1, and therefore if it is less than half of 1, which is less than 0.5, you can drop that variable, and then you go on improving your your research questionnaire. Another thing is also for testing the credibility and reliability of your questionnaire before you start going to data collection. And there are different methods of testing for validity. There are different methods of testing for credibility and reliability. And in some cases, you could take your questionnaire to professionals or experts in that field. They can tell you about the content validity. They can tell you whether everything that should be asked about this construct is there, or whether if there is anything that is missing, they could tell you add this question or remove this question because they have experience in that field. So there are different ways of pilot testing your instruments. You can collect data, but this data that you collect should be different, should be in a different place or a different location from the one that you're going to collect data. Let's say you want to collect data from county A. You can collect the same data using the same tool in county B, in another county, just so that you can test your tool. I think that is it, Otto. Aurelia?
Yeah, I'm seeing hands are up. So maybe we can start with Stephen and then Pamela and then Helen in that order.
Yes.
Stephen?
Thanks, Lord.
Hi, guys. Thank you for this opportunity. Those are great presentations from Nicholas and Dan. I have a few questions on. First of all, this goes to Nicholas. We know about ethical approvals; they are very important. Also, everyone in research has to follow them, and we also know about NACOSTI license. About NACOSTI license, it means that it's very specific to the research that you're conducting. So my question is about operational research. How about them? Do you always need to seek approvals and licenses? Also, I can give you an instance whereby maybe you are the head of a sub-county. You are in charge of so many health facilities. Maybe there's some things maybe you are implementing that you actually want to find out how it's performing. Because you see, it's an operational research. And always you have to share your findings so that it can assist the other counties and sub-counties. So my question is it very important because you see, getting those approvals, and it's something that you need to find out actually, so that you can assist or can see where to implement or where to correct. But always you have to share your findings so that the other sub counties. So in that kind of, it means that it will have to go up to publishing. And then the second thing is that I'm very impressed by Dan about all the analytical softwares that you know how to use. I'd like to find which one you prefer more, and how come you manage to tackle all of them, because you know about R, Python, SPSS, Stata, all of them are almost similar. And I know I'm proficient in Stata, but you see there is some conflicting whereby you use Stata and you try to use R. And there are somewhere commands, somewhere conflicts, and it means that you keep referring, and actually having both of them, tackling all of them, especially when you include even SATA into SPSS into the mix, it's kind of difficult. Maybe I'd like to hear your experience, having a 5 years experience. And lastly, for both of you, I know about, you see, when you're doing analysis, there is bivariate, and before you go to multivariate, you might decide to do like stepwise backward logistic regression to find a suitable model for you to actually do the last model, the variables that are going to remain from the stepwise, either backward or forward, are the ones going to multivariate. No, this is difficult for some of the editors. I don't know whether they don't understand that you can do that, because I remember I've sent one of the papers to be published, but some are questioning because they are wondering how come because you see when you're doing that, you've put the format, you've put a table, and you've shown that this variable at bivariate at crude odds ratio, it was this. They expect, because you've mentioned that all variables that are less or equal to 0.2 are going to multivariate level, are going to multivariate analysis. So where at bivariate, of course, you mentioned that you're going to take it to multivariate, but it doesn't meet the model. So it means that at adjusted odds ratio, it's not going to be there, because it actually didn't meet the model. Therefore, it means that you didn't do the multivariate analysis. So it's very difficult for some of the editors to understand this. Maybe I'll get some experience, or maybe some from Nicholas on how you go about this, because it has been difficult for me, especially if you try to explain to them, because when you give back the reviews or feedback, they seem not to get it. Thank you.
Auta, you can go first.
Thank you, Stephen.
Oh,
Yes, maybe you can answer that, or you want some time to think of the answer. If you want, we can go to another question, but feel free.
Yeah, I can start with the first one. I work at the university, and what I have seen, I'll just give an example where we have seen people at Kenya Medical Research Institute coming to, because Maseno University has an ethical review committee that reviews, and if you don't have to go all the way to Nakoste, Maseno University has an ethical review committee that does review, of course, at a fee for all these researchers, and they get approval if the committee feels that their research is ethical, and they get the permit to proceed and do it. I have seen this done with certain projects that are attached to KEMRI. I'm not really sure how the operational kind of work, whatever you are talking about, is handled, but I would not really say that I have an express answer to this, because what I have ideas about are the actual academic research activities that happen within the confines of the university. So the example that I have only seen is where there was a project that was done at KEMRI, and they came to Maseno and they needed their proposal reviewed by the ethical review committee of Maseno University. I am not really sure about the operational kind of research that you're talking about, so I will lie if I tell you that I have an express answer to that, but then it's also a good thing that I can go and find out. And yeah, I know we will get a forum where I can be able to answer this. But thank you for that, because then something for me to really go and find out, how then do you deal with that? Do they also have to go through that kind of review? And anything about data analysis, whatever you ask, those ones, I think Dan will handle them. I'm not very proficient in that analysis myself.
Yes, Auta, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. It's a loaded question. It is a very good question. On your first question that Auta is trying to answer, since when it comes to that operational data collection, you don't need the permit from NACOST. All you might require is to register with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner as a data processor, or as a data, what do you call them, controller. And once you have that, because if you read that act, the Data Protection Act, most of these things, the government agencies, when data is being collected for purpose of policy, for purposes of government, you don't have to go and you don't need to use NACOST. You're not required, NACOST is not required, because what I've heard from you is that you're speaking about for sub-county and the county government. That's what you're talking about. And if that is the case, it's for use for public use, for the government, either at local government, whatever government, you don't need an NACOST permit. All you need to have is just, as part of the new regulation, that certificate that you've registered with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. You don't need to be getting NACOST every now and then, because for NACOST you have to specify the period, the research that you're doing, and for the period that you'll be doing this research, and you pay for that. And mostly that is usually meant mostly for academic research, or for students coming from other countries to come and do their research here, and also for the students that are doing research in Kenya. And that's why it is always recommended, and they always ask you to take back a copy of your thesis, of your complete thesis, to them, so that they can put it in their library for use by other people. So NACOST should not be a problem for the kind of work that you're doing. Now, you've asked a few other questions on why I was able to do all these languages. The reason I came to understand these languages, the reason why it happened, is out of demand. Because sometimes someone sends you their data, they want you to analyze their data, and they have their supervisor. Their supervisor maybe is only proficient in Stata. And they want the results in the form, and the graphs and the results in form of Stata, the way Stata produces them. That's how the supervisor will only be contented, because that's the program they know, and that's the software they know. So as a matter of necessity, I had to go back, learn Stata, learn all those things, so that I can be able. SPSS is easy. That's not an issue. Everyone should know that anyway. So that's why I went back to learning all these other languages, just to know, just so that I can be specific to that student, so that I can reproduce, or I can create a response or an output that their lecturers can agree with, or they can allow, they can accept. That is why I learned all those things. I started with R programming because I had always been looking for a language to learn. And then I came across R programming for statistics. And I loved it so much, so I learned it very quickly. But then I realized there are some limitations to it. And therefore, I went ahead and started doing Python, so that I could have a broader understanding of programming. Because R is somehow restricted in some ways, in so many ways. But when you learn other programming languages, those capabilities are opened. So that is the reason why I did all these things. You've asked about the processes of from bivariate to multivariate, maybe the way of dropping the variables that are not important to you, to your models. I would advise that in most cases, you can explain this thing in your research methodology. But when you come to your results, just put the results of your final outcomes and interpret that. You don't have to go in your results and start showing the steps that you went through to get to the final model that you've settled upon. Just explain that in your research methodology. This is what I did this, but this was dropped. But now in your results, just show the final model that you used, and then just interpret that model. And then you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. That's all.
Thank you, Stephen and Dan. Stephen, if you still want more discussion with Dan, you can chat him on the chat separately, and you can maybe exchange contacts and talk about it a bit more. But thank you very much, Pamela.
Good morning, and thank you very much. In fact, it is very interesting. However, I joined a bit late due to some unavoidable circumstances. So my question, in fact, first, before I ask a question, I would like to appreciate the information which we have received, especially Dan. You are making me to go back and start studying programming, because I like the way you are explaining it, how you are inspired. And again, I know in this team there are some people who might also want to try. So again, I'll get your number so that at least you can show me the processes of how to do that, because that is where the researchers have a problem in data analysis. That is where we have a problem. So you give somebody to analyze data for you, and then there is a lot of errors, then back and forth, especially in the field of academic. So my question was about, is around meta-analysis and systematic review. So we are talking about ethical approval on data use, and also on just going to the field. But however, meta-analysis or systematic review is already, that is the research which has been done, has been published, and then you want to review, and then you find the gaps and come out with your own resolutions or findings. So my question, do we also need a ethical approval certificate that would enable me to present this data and also publish it, or that one I can do without approval? Then on another methodology is, I want to ask about Likert scale. In it one Likert scale. So this Likert, which one is the best method? The best method can we use to analyze Likert scale questionnaires, so that at least you can, because there was a time I was trying to use correlation. I was told not to use correlation. Then I was so much confused. Again, that one you can help us. And then lastly, I want to ask about mixed method, both using qualitative and quantitative analysis. So if you compare them, which one is can you use both qualitative and quantitative analysis, or you go one way? Which one can give more information? Thank you.
So these are for Dan. So we have 10 minutes remaining. As Dan is answering the question, then we go to Helen. We shall I've put a link on the chat, which I mentioned that we'd like to know what are your actual needs, so that we can see if we can design a course. Because, you know, of course, we also don't want Dan to have everyone's number and every day he's just sorting a small problem, which can be sorted if people are even in a cohort and they can learn together. So click on the link. It's voluntary. Just fill in your details. One of the questions is just mention what areas would you like covered, what areas of concern are concerning you right now, and then we shall be able to do something about it and tell you more about the type of course. So over to you, Dan.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I think Ota will really answer about the meta-analysis, the systematic review and all that. Let me just answer on the Likert scale and maybe the mixed methods. So the Likert scale, this is where you can have a 7-point Likert scale or 5-point Likert scale, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, or to very strongly that. So these statements are given numbers or figures like 1 to 7 or 1 to 5. And I believe you are told not to use the method you use because that 1 and that 5 does not really mean 5. And the difference between 1 and 2 is not really 1. And that is the thing. That value of assigning strongly agree to 5 is not really that value number 5, that the value of that 5. It is just a representative of that. So it would be very how do I say it? It is not okay for you to use the normal methods that you use when you're doing normal calculation. For example, getting money, the amount of money people are earning in different maybe jobs. You cannot analyze that data with the same as this one. And therefore, there are different methods. You can analyze it quantitatively or qualitatively. And what I've seen, most of the way this data is analyzed quantitatively, when you look at the literature and you really explore it, you find most of the times the way it is done, it is usually incorrect. But anyway, that is what is expected by so many of the lecturers at the universities. And sometimes you have to do it. But deep down, you feel this is not the right way of doing this analysis. I think this is something maybe we can speak with Oleria, and maybe we can organize maybe a class or such a thing whereby we can speak in detail of how to go about Likert scale data, how you should analyze them and how you should interpret them, because you cannot interpret it as just the other data. When it comes to mixed methods is quite an advanced way of regressing, and because you're working with fixed effects and random effects, and most of the time the random effects are usually categorical. And I believe the best way, these are quantitative methods that you use. I hope that answers your question. And I know there is a lot of confusion when it comes to Likert scale. Likert scale, it is very good when you're collecting data, but when it comes to analysis, there's a lot of confusion going on in there. And I believe these are things we can speak about and come up with a better way of maybe showing our output. But it is usually a problem between the universities and most maybe what data analysts do. Maybe Ota can answer on meta-analysis and systematic review. Thank you.
Yeah, we also have a very limited time remaining, so I would allow Helen to ask her question, and then I will answer the meta-analysis question with any question that Helen might have, so that we also don't run out of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan and Nicholas. Mine is a quick one. I'm at a point where I'm analyzing my data. I just wanted to know, I know I'm supposed to tie my findings to chapter 2, like the literature review I have. So I wanted to ask, does this come in chapter 4 or 5? And then if the existing findings do not agree with my current findings, is that okay? And yeah, something like that. Just to know where I should actually like tie my literature review to my findings. Is it in chapter 4 and 5? And what if they do not agree in this case? Thank you.
Okay, you are collecting data so that you can, because what happens is you don't have to, your data does not have to really fit into your predetermined structure. So you went out, you had an hypothesis, for example, but then you came out and realized, hey, the data I'm collecting, I found that in literature, the reason for the high school dropout rates in a certain area has been reported to be because of this other thing. But then what I'm finding from the field is completely different. Now, that is the essence of research. In research, you really don't have to agree with all the previous research that were done out there. That is the new knowledge you are bringing. You are saying, hey, this is what other people found, but this is what I found. And then the most important thing is for you to really just justify, why do you think your results are different? Is it because of the methodology? Is it because of the kind of analysis you did? Is it because of the approach you took? Is it because of whatever it is? If the data is different, if the results you are getting are different from those that were done previously, so it's a good thing. You are contributing to knowledge, and it's just about you fitting now, trying to find how does your data fit into the bigger context in your research. So if you have data that does not agree with the previous works, it's not a bad thing. Just convince them that, hey, this is what I found in the field, and this is how I can talk about them. Now, it's always difficult for me to answer questions, especially depending on when people mention the chapters, because different universities, chapter 4 in a university could be talking about a different thing from a different university. In my university, for example, right now, we are not writing thesis in terms of that. We are writing each objective as a manuscript. When you read a thesis from Maseno University right now, you will find that the data that is collected for objective 1 is written, that chapter is complete. So you have like a manuscript from the introduction to methodology to results to discussion. And then you go to another objective, you write it again like that. You go to another objective, you write it again like that, so that each objective is independent like a paper. So it's difficult for me to find what chapter 4 contains in your context and chapter 5, for example. So maybe if you could tell me what goes into chapter 4 in your university and what goes into chapter 5. But in a nutshell, when you are doing your literature review, most of the time you are depending on your field, there are those who have in the social sciences, mostly you have the empirical literature review and also you have the theoretical literature review. So the theoretical literature review is just reviewing the theories that the central theories that support your work. So your work revolves around certain theories. So that is what convincing them that this is the best theory and this is the theory that supports my work. And then now when you come to the empirical literature review, where you are reviewing literature based on empirical research data that was collected and discussed and all that. So when you are discussing your data, this is where, when you are discussing, because I have found my data now, I'm getting to a point where I'm now interpreting why the data is the way it is. I have found that this is higher than this. This is more frequent than this. People are aware about this than they are about this. So that is the data you have. Now, when you are coming now down to the discussion section, to avoid putting a lot of references, it's always a good thing to go back to your literature review section and check, are there some studies that are really speaking to your research? And if they're not speaking to your research, why are they not speaking to your research? So at the point of discussion and interpretation of your research, this is where you try to tie your literature review section to the data you have, because that is where you are comparing the works of other people with your work. So basically, during the discussion and interpretation, this is where you try to go back and check what studies have I cited up there and what did they find. So basically, that is where you tie them down. We only have like 2 minutes. Now, I want to answer. Pamela asked about if you are doing meta-analysis and this is what you are going to present. So you are going to get into other people's data. We talked about secondary data collection, and you are not really going out there to collect data, but you are going to base your research on data that has been done by other people. So you are going to find data from other people. I have seen there are universities like Maseno that insist that whatever your research is, whether you are dealing with human or animal subjects, whether you are going to collect data using surveys and you are going to get sensitive information, you must get ethical review permit from the ethical review committee of Maseno University. That is what Maseno University requires. So for Maseno, regardless of the kind of study you are doing, you must take it through ethical review committee. It has to go. Whatever study it is, whether you are going to collect secondary data or going to collect primary data. So My question, my answer is a very simple answer. Go and check what your university requires. But normally, ordinarily, most people get these ethical permits when they are dealing with human or animal subjects. So sometimes you're not going to collect human or animal subjects. You're not going to handle them. You're not going to collect sensitive information from people. There are universities that will tell you, then in that case, you don't need an ethical review committee to go through your work, or you don't need any ethical permits. So check what your university wants again, and just check what the university requires. Tell them this is the kind of research I'm doing. Do I really need to take this through an ethical review committee? Or is it okay that I can go ahead with it? We say no, all research for masters and PhD must go through ethical review, regardless of the methodology you are taking. So check what your university requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. We are at the point of our time. I think I'll just add something about ethics. Remember, ethics is also not for us, or ethics is not also about the human subject. It's also about getting an opportunity for the rigor of the research to be examined. You'll find when you apply to NACOTSI, they will ask you, what is your sample size? What is your methodology? So it's not only to protect the human subject, it's also to make sure that the findings you're going to get from this research will be reliable and valid. So that's why also I would imagine Outa's University wants everyone to actually have an ethical approval, so that people are not submitting meta-research or systematic reviews that are very weak methodology and making conclusions. Remember, systematic review is the topmost type of highest evidence you can generate in the hierarchy of evidence. So if the methodology is not sound and people make conclusions with an unsound methodology, then it means we will have wrong results. So ethical review is also helping to really improve the rigor of the research. The other point I'll mention is, based on what Helen has said, is that I had a supervisor who told me that the real research actually begins when you come back from your data collection. Sometimes even what you had written before, you may even have to do away with it and start all over again. And the work of a researcher is not to fit in, it is to allow your mind to open up to the new findings you have found that are not even speaking to what you actually thought. That's the beauty of research. So don't worry when things don't fit. It's actually why we are doing this. So please fill in. I've seen people are filling in the link. Thank you. We will have an idea. So some of these courses we will do a webinar. Others might be long-term. For long-term courses, what we do, we usually ask the participants to contribute an incentive to the trainer, because you can imagine someone training you for maybe 4 weeks. So for long ones, we ask people to contribute, and of course it's voluntary. But for webinars like this, we are available to always have something for you. So I don't know if there's any other question, but we are done. I just want to thank everyone for making time, more especially our two competent panelists and peer panelists, that is Outa and Dan. Thank you so much for making time. I was at the back of the scenes as we were preparing, and I saw the amount of work you had to do, and I'm so grateful. I think all of us are grateful. If you appreciate them, please put it on chat. You know, sometimes when someone gives of their time, a thank you goes a long way. I know everyone has appreciated. So some of you are asking how you'll get the recording. We are going to post the recording on the Other Aid Social Science page, which I support, and also the Africana Social Science page, Africana Club, which I also support. So we'll put the recording and we'll also have the slides. So this will be on Monday, because now it's the weekend. We'll send them on Monday. So don't worry, we got you. And in case of any questions, the form that I have sent has my WhatsApp number, Aurelia. You can always WhatsApp me in case of anything. I'll respond. Maybe you haven't received, I'll respond. So I don't know if there's anything else, but we are done and grateful. Do you have anything out and done? Any last famous words?
No, not now. I am just happy that people were able to attend on a weekend, and that we had some conversation. The only thing is this conversation cannot end here. Issues around research, data collection, research designs, these are conversations that need actual, really, times where you just say, okay, today we are going to talk about how to select the right research design, and maybe it's talking about a specific, like exploratory research design, for example. How do you go around? What does it entail? So it requires a lot of conversations that cannot be done in 1 hour, 30 minutes. So we are looking forward to times when we can be able to maybe either have long-term trainings, or maybe have times when we have webinars where we can be able now to be talking about more. I know people still have a lot of questions, but then we cannot address all this in this sitting. So we hope to be able to interact with you more and be able to support you even further. Thank you.
Yes, I'm just saying, maybe you can add just the links to the sites which you are going to post the videos and the slides and all that, maybe for them to just take note and maybe copy somewhere and have them for easy access.
Okay, so we will have the African Journal Club, those ones who are in our club, and the other age social science. Those are the two places we posted this social science journal club. So that's where we will post them. Journal club. Yes. So you will have all of them. Okay, good people.
Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best. Don't worry, we will journey together. Even me, I'm also learning, so we'll be together. Don't worry, yes. So bye-bye, you can leave at your own time. I'll just hang on for maybe 2-3 minutes in case someone has something they would like to ask, and then we will close.
Thank you and bye. Good weekend.
You too. Maybe Out and Dan, are you out? We can stay a bit. Out, are you gone? Okay. Dan, it's okay. We can speak later. Go and rest.
I'm still here. It's okay. I can
I think Out has gone out. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.